Following the collapse of Mycenaean Greece at the end of the Bronze Age during the late 12th century BCE, the Hellenic world entered a period known as the Greek Dark Ages. The political and economic turmoil that followed, as well as migrations of the northern tribes southwards, just added to the devastation of the remnants of what was once a great Bronze Age society. In such circumstances, many of the remaining chieftains saw no other option but to gather their men and set sail across the sea in hopes of establishing their new homes elsewhere, thus starting the period of Greek colonization that would eventually see new Hellenic settlements emerge across the Mediterranean and Black Seas. One of the first regions to be settled by the Hellenic-speaking colonists was that of Aeolis, a coastal area of the northwestern Asia Minor, and one of the centers that would lead the way of Hellenic transition from the Dark into the Archaic period. The original idea of colonizing this region was said to have emerged at the time when the Mycenaean kings, although in heavy decline, had still ruled much of the Peloponnesian Peninsula. Naturally, the reasons behind these campaigns were much different than those of the archaic times, where Hellenic city-states deliberately sent out colonial expeditions to relieve themselves of the growing population and also used their colonies overseas to further their own wealth and trade networks. In contrast, these early expeditions were rather forced and carried out of necessity for mere survival by the chieftains of the devastated lands running away before the tribal migrations following the collapse of the world order they once knew. In mid to late 12th century BCE, King Orestes, son of legendary Agamemnon, was said to have defended his realm in a war against the invading tribes from the north, which would later come to be known as Dorians. However, considering the series of civil wars that took place in the preceding decades, as well as constant waves of northern invaders, Peloponnese was left devastated, and the Achaean realm was clearly on its last legs. According to the ancient tradition, it was during the reign of Orestes that the Mycenaeans originally planned a sea expedition aiming to colonize the shores of Asia Minor. However, in year which according to ancient dating such as that of Eratosthenes is placed at 1124 BCE, King Orestes, who initially planned to lead the expedition, passed away in Arcadia, leaving the throne to his son Tisamenus. Late King's other son, and Tisamenus' half-brother, Pentheus, was nevertheless set to carry on with the task and lead the expedition in that same year. Prince Pentheus gathered his companions, with the bulk of the colonial force consisting of the Aeolian exiles, who had been forced out of their lands by the Thessalians and took shelter in Boeotia, which was already harboring a significant Aeolian population. Now the further reports on this expedition are vague, except that Pentheus reportedly moved with his companions by land, passing through Boeotia and Thessaly, and ultimately reaching Thracia. According to some accounts, Pentheus eventually went to establish a colony on the island of Lesbos. However, other sources claim that this was accomplished by his descendants, historically known as the Penthelii. If we take into account the foundation dates of the Aeolian cities, it is unlikely that crossing into Asia and the Aegean islands were accomplished by Pentheus himself, but rather his descendants that actually laid foundations for the first Aeolian colonies. By the end of the 12th century BCE, the final Mycenaean ruler Tisamenus saw his weakened kingdom crumbling before the Heraclid-led coalition of Dorians and other tribes. His eldest son, Comites, much like his uncle, decided to gather his men and flee for Asia. Other Achaean leaders, such as Agamemnon's descendants through another lineage, namely Clewes, son of Dorus, and Malaos, also started gathering the Aeolians around them, temporarily basing themselves near Mount Phyrkion in the region of Locris. Ultimately, the remnants of the Mycenaean kingdom were overrun by the invaders, resulting in death of King Tisamenus and total political fragmentation leading to the Greek Dark Ages. One of Pentheus' sons, Damasias, would join those Achaeans that decided to stay on Peloponnese and move to the northern part of the peninsula, expelling the Ionian chieftains that resided there and subsequently founding the region of Achaea. His other son, Echelatus, in different sources also known as Echelas or Archelaus, was in turn a part of Pentheus' expedition and upon his father's death continued the incursion into Asia. According to Strabo, Echelatus crossed the Hellespont and conducted expeditions across the coast all the way to the area of Daskylion near Cyzicus. However, it would not be Echelatus that would ultimately reach the land that was to become Aeolis. His youngest son, Grote, would succeed him and decide to lead the Aeolian contingent to another direction, to the southwest. All of these campaigns were resisted by the local tribes, likely consisting of Mysians, Leleges, and Pelasgians. As the expedition had reached the river west of Cyzicus, it likely became clear that the further they went, the Aeolians would face stiffer and stiffer resistance by the hostile Mysians, who probably outnumbered the Greeks and held a home territory advantage. Thus, it was obvious that the Aeolian force had to be moved to a more favorable terrain with more realistic prospects of successfully establishing a colony. Grote decided that the island of Lesbos would be the best bet and would also provide colonists with a great geographic position, ideal for a long-term settlement. In order to reach Lesbos, the Aeolians first had to deal with the situation at hand, the approaching hostile army looking to destroy the invaders. According to the ancient sources, the battle took place at the river, with the Aeolian forces coming out victorious. The river itself was subsequently named Granicus, literally meaning the victory of Grote. The Aeolian expedition thus successfully reached the shore and moved back into the Aegean Sea. In about 1090 BCE, Prince Grote was said to have reached Lesbos. Any local resistance was soon defeated and the island free for the Aeolian colonists to settle. As the first colony was established, Grote was declared king of Aeolis, thus founding the royal dynasty of Penthelii. Following the successful establishment of the first Aeolian colony, the blueprint was laid out for the Greeks to set sail across the sea and seize new lands for themselves. The Asian coast opposite Lesbos, however, remained at the hands of the native tribes, but that too was about to change. By the time Grote established himself on Lesbos, another expeditionary force was being formed on the Greek mainland. Grote's cousins, Clewes and Malaos, had finally raised their army and moved to Boeotia. Reminiscent of legendary Agamemnon, the two Achaean leaders departed with their fleet from Aeolis, just like their ancestors had done at the time of the Trojan War. This new Aeolian force landed in the territory of Pelasgians, whose capital city was Larissa. The Pelasgian force marched out to meet them, but it was clear that the Greek force was superior, decisively defeating the natives and laying siege to their capital. Inevitably, as Larissa fell to the Aeolians, the way was paved for the establishment of the region of Aeolis on the shores of Asia Minor. In 1080 BCE, forces under Cleus and Malaos founded the colony of Kymi, cementing the Aeolian control of the area and starting the dawn of the new era. On Lesbos, the city of Mytilene would emerge as the seat of the Panthilii, with the polis of Machinma later becoming the rival for the Aeolian supremacy over the island. In the following centuries, the Aeolians from Lesbos and Kymi would go on to found numerous other colonies in the area, including Smyrna, Assos, Adramyttion, Pitani, Grineon, and many others, most of which would eventually form the Aeolian Dodecapolis, or the League of the 12 Aeolian cities of the archaic times. We will continue to talk about the Greek colonization campaigns of the Dark Ages, so make sure to subscribe to the channel and click the bell button in order to get notified about the future content. Special thanks to History with Sai, Nico, Chris Ernst, Panayotis Yiannopoulos, Fred Leckie, Tim Lane, Derek Wildstar, ABC Sheikh, Padre 91, Argyris Margaritis, Joel Sally Briggs, Vineyard Illumination, and Estate Care for their continuous support. If you wish to partake in the decision making for the future videos, feel free to join us on Patreon. This was WanaxTV, and we'll see you again soon.